Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage and relationship coaching, dissociative disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our 7th episode of season 28, a very special guest and the voice of resilience, Erica Marchant. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Erica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Dan. I hope you're doing well today. I am Erica Marchant, and I'm known as the Voice of Resilience. I'm a small business owner, author, and public speaker. I am actually a restaurateur. I started a restaurant with my husband a couple of years ago, and we've been operating it ever since, but I've done a lot of things in my life. And I say that I'm known as the Voice of Resilience because I actually grew up in poverty and had always thought that I would struggle with everything that I ever did and wouldn't be able to make something of myself the way I wanted to, even though I had dreamed of something more. And I had to learn through resilience, through grit, and through changing my mindset to a growth mindset that life was possible for me because it didn't matter how I grew up. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to be here, for you to be here as well. So let's go back into your childhood. And you said that you grew up in poverty. And what exactly, when you start going into high school and going to college, etc., did you always have that restricted mindset to say, what is the point of all this? Because I'm never going to be able to do anything more out of my life.
I feel like growing up poor, we were often homeless. We were food insecure. We lived with other people as much as we could. And when I was in high school, I actually shared a living room with my mother and my little brother, and I had to sleep on a pull-out sofa next to my mother. And, in my future self here, I know that I'm grateful I actually had a roof over my head during, those moments, and that we weren't on the streets, because that is something that could have happened. But I think a lot of it had to do with society's expectations as well, because of the way everybody else around you sees you and the things that they tell you. And I had always had dreamed of being an author. And so all through high school, I was a writer, I was in drama club. But the circumstances of my living situation and my environment around me really prohibited me, at least I thought it did, from putting myself out there, from trying harder or being more or doing more, because I was, stuck in this mindset that I needed to be in my place. And even going off to college, there were moments when things would get really hard, and my mindset was just to give up. This is really hard. I'm just going to give up on this. I'm not going to do this. It's too difficult for me to get there. I'm not going to drive there. I'm not going to stick with this class because this class isn't doing anything for me. And knowing that, now when I look back on that, I realize that that was how I was taught growing up, because life is hard and everything you do is hard. So you really do have to choose your hard. Do you want to stick with, this lifestyle that you don't like, that you're not doing well at, never trying? That's hard because it wears on you, and you have all of these expectations that you're never going to be able to meet, and you're always feeling bad about yourself. Or do you want to choose the hard that's going to help you follow your dreams and live your life and make something greater? And I had always dreamed of being something more, I said, than just living a mediocre life and just trying to earn a paycheck and live paycheck to paycheck.
Mhm.
Uh, in high school, I had no idea how I was going to do that, but hindsight's a great thing, right?
Yes. Oh, I agree with you on that one, Erica. But so if let's say we look at the famous author Rhonda Byrne that wrote the book The Secret, with the laws of attraction, thought become things. So do you think that the thought of people, if they don't put the belief and action behind those thoughts, they will never become anything in life? So if you constantly think negative, isn't that a precursor to failure? Because
Yes.
then at this point, how do you change that mindset from the negativity to positive if nothing really going well in life, if you're always in the same pattern, same routine, and nothing changes? So how do you detach yourself from all that?
That is really hard. And I'm going to say that it definitely took me many, many years. I've been working on my own mental health and my mindset over, almost 2 decades now. And it can be very difficult. Your mind always wants to go to the negative first. It's always going to see the negative, and that's sort of a protection mechanism for you in order to protect you. But in today's society, we don't need our mind to tell us that we're terrible or we can't do this, and so on and so forth. We have to try to talk to ourselves and reverse that statement. And one of the things that I developed over the years was learning to look on the bright side of things and see that in every situation, there's good and there's bad, no matter how bad it is. And for example, yes, I was poor. Yes, I was homeless. My mother had, to be on food stamps, but at least I had, I was sleeping in a bed. At least I had food when I woke up in the morning in high school, for example. There was always these things, or I had a friend that I could talk to or turn to, or a friend's parent who would be there for me when I didn't have my parent to be there for me. And over time, I started using that as a way of helping me understand that no matter how bad things were, there's always something good that's going to come of it, or there's always something good you can see in that. A recent example I can say for that is my car broke down recently. My husband and I run a restaurant. We have one car that we use to get back and forth to work, and our car broke down. And our first thought was like, how are we going to get to work? How are we going to do this? But we live 6 minutes away from work. It's a 6-minute walk. So when we got up out of the house and we started walking, and I said to my husband, yeah, our cars broke down. Life is a little bit tough for us right now. We're exhausted because we have this restaurant, but at least we only have a 6-minute commute. And that's looking at the bright side of things. And that takes that whole negative aspect in your mind and then turns it on its head, because now you're looking at a positive thing to this negative outcome.
I agree 100%. You always have to look at the bright side and not always focus on all the negative, because like you said in the beginning, choose your hard, because
Yes.
everything is going to be hard in life. But then if we go back into what you mentioned a few minutes earlier, Erica, you said that the mind tries to protect you and always have the tendency to go into the negative because it doesn't believe that you deserve the positive. So it's kind of like going to always push you into thinking negative. But then I mean, when it comes to protecting us, the mind that is,
Right.
and we know that fear is just an illusion, and
Yes.
mind construct an environment that is more conducive for us to be able to find the easier way out versus facing the difficult moments.
Right.
Isn't that trend more common among everyone, and then that will just continue adapting a habit that is not really productive for us?
Yes, fear is a great thing. And I find that I definitely lived a lot of my life in fear. When I go back to being younger and wanting to be an author before I really started publishing, I would write and then I would be afraid to share it with people. Well, what is everybody going to think? And when you think something like that, well, I'm afraid to share it. What is everybody going to think? Your mind is basically going to say, you're right. Everybody's going to think it's terrible. You're going to feel bad. Don't do this. Don't put that out there. And that's how it's trying to protect you from, facing that fear. But then when you realize you put that out there and you face your fear, sure, some people are going to think it's terrible, or some people aren't going to like it, or everybody's going to have an opinion. But for the most part, it's probably going to be well received. And one of the things I like to say that, especially with writing, is that if the people who are reading your stuff don't like it, well, then they're not your audience. You're working with the wrong people.
That's so true. But you know what they say about opinion, Erica?
Right.
Opinion are like assholes. Everyone has one.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
we have to really think about what opinion we will take to benefit us and which one we will reject. Again, if you
Right.
focus too much on getting validation from other people, then you're on the wrong track. And this is what a lot
Exactly.
of people feel that, oh, you know what? They go and ask people for authorization. Now, listen to this, the word
Mhm.
authorization to be able to achieve their own dream. How pathetic is that?
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so we have to kind of detach ourselves from awaiting other people to say, yes, you're on the right track, because no one gives a rat ass. No one
No
at all.
one gives you permission.
about your success. They just focus on theirs. And when they try to project their own insecurity on you, is because they feel that, well, if Erica is going to go and write her book and she's going to become successful and she's going to be able to do this, and I'm going to be stuck in my same old job that I hate every single day, but yet I cannot see other people succeed and me fail. So that's what they're going to do anything in their power to be able to bring you down.
Exactly. I've definitely felt that in my time where this person's succeeding, so it's never going to happen for me.
Mhm. So if we attach this whole concept that you talked about when it comes to limited mindset and imposter syndrome, because we did discuss that before we
Right.
did this podcast, are they intrinsically correlated with each other? I mean, does it mean that those who have limited mindset will automatically implement this imposter syndrome in their mind?
I think so, because I think that having that fixed mindset or that limited mindset, it's putting you in a position where you've just told yourself who you are and this box that you're in. And so anything outside of that box that you try to step into, you're going to feel like an imposter. Because, one of the things that I like to say is that everybody starts from zero. I mean, when you're a baby, you don't know how to walk, you learn to walk. When
Correct.
you go to school, you don't know how to add, you learn to add, and read and so on and so forth. And we go through life. And when we're kids, like that's no big deal. You don't know something, you learn it. But as you get older, when you don't know something, you feel like an imposter when you start trying to learn it because you don't know it. And I think a lot of that comes from, you know, societal expectations and other people's opinions. And you put yourself in this box. And one of the things that had happened to me, and it's been a few decades now, where I used to say, like, why me? Why would that happen to me? That's never going to happen to me. Why would it be me? And then one day I had this realization that, like, why not me? Why can't I do that? Why shouldn't I learn that? And who cares if I make a mistake? I'm going to make mistakes anyway. And it was a pivotal moment in my life where then I was like, now I feel I can step out of this box. But there'll still be these moments even now where, I'm running a full service restaurant and I do all of this catering and I'm an author and people will talk to me about it, and I'll still say to myself, like, oh, I'm not an expert, or I'll get invited on a podcast, like, oh, they want me to be on a podcast. I'm not an expert in that. And then I have to remind myself, like, yes, I am, and if there's something I want to be an expert in or something I want to do that I don't know yet, I got to go do that. But the imposter syndrome it's difficult because it puts you in a position with thinking that you can't do something or that you can't be something, even if you want to.
So do you think that if you eliminate fear, which is close to impossible because
Right.
always be present, do you think that at this point in time, people will kind of look at themselves as more of a potential than a hindrance, more of someone that they can achieve whatever dreams they want to achieve? Because if you look at all the successful people out there, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg,
Right.
Gary Cardone, and all the others out there,
Mhm.
it's not like they're smarter or anything, because if you look at all of what they've done, they didn't really achieve something new. I mean, if you look at Zuckerberg, he stole the idea
Right.
of people. If you look at Elon Musk, he bought all those rights for Tesla. So they didn't really invent anything per se. Even Microsoft, the same thing. So do you think that if you focus more on not comparing yourself directly to them, but try to kind of somewhat tweak the wheel a little bit, and then you could reinvent something completely different, do you think that that will bring people their peace of mind to know that they can accomplish great things in life?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I think that a lot of people sit around waiting for permission to do things.
Mhm.
When we go back to that box that they're in, like we go to high school, we have to go to college, we have to get a job. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get a desk job, I'm going to sit in an office, and then doing something outside of that is unfounded because you don't know. And then when you think you want to do that stuff, you're kind of waiting for permission. And the only person who can give you permission to do something is you. You don't need permission from anybody else.
That's so true.
And we have in our society, and it's normal for you to worry or care about what other people think, but sometimes we do that to a degree, and that brings on the fear that other people are going to look down on us or think, we're stupid. And I like to talk about Mel Robbins on this one, because she talks about this often, where when she started becoming a life coach, she had, she thought all her friends are going to say, you, why would, who's going to go to you when, to get coaching advice? Why would they go to you? And it's like, they don't mean to be negative and hurtful when they do this, but this is a natural reaction a lot of people in your life are going to have. And that's a natural fear that that people have about other people feeling for them. And so and I think what all the greats, this is, my personal opinion, have is that they just said, screw that. I don't care what you think. And that fear that you're going to have naturally, because it's impossible to get rid of fear, right? You're just going to step over it and do it anyway.
Yes, that's actually a very, very good point. But don't you think, Erica, that I mean, I'm not here to be able to be pointing fingers at anyone or
Right.
anything, but don't you think that the educational system is screwing up everyone who wants to be able to do something out of them?
Yes.
And they try to basically put us into a slave mindset to say,
Yes.
go to college, you get a job, you get this, you just obey. And they don't allow, I mean, look, my son has been diagnosed with ADHD and ODD, okay?
Okay.
So the thing is that it's not his fault per se, is that the school system doesn't know how to be able to deal with someone that is so creative, so energetic. So they try to
Right.
dumb it down by telling them, okay, take Adderall or take Ritalin because
Yeah.
we could not deal with someone or some kid that has those kind of condition because they're not equipped. So why don't we train those teachers, encourage those kids, be able to really excel in life instead of try to put them into a stupid box and tell them this is what you should do. I mean, screw them all. To be honest, the
Right.
education system is completely effed up.
I agree with that. I have three children of my own right now. My oldest just graduated high school, and since he started, I've been saying the same thing, that, the school system, it was originally created in order to teach people how to work in factories. And I
Yes,
don't think much has changed since then. We're still putting them in lines. We're still keeping them inside all day. They're still sitting in rows and desks, and of course we need to learn how to, do math and learn how to read and all of that stuff. But I definitely think it takes a lot of the creative side out of it. And for me personally, and I've said this to my son, like, if you have a passion or a dream, I'm going to push you towards that. I don't care what the world thinks. My son wants to become a director, and he envisions himself directing movies someday. So right now he graduated high school. He went to a tech school for graphics. He graduated, and he's going to a private college to study cinema. And I am 100% pushing him into that, regardless of everybody who's going to think, well, how are you going to make money doing that? Or, there can
yes.
only be one Steven Spielberg, so on and so forth. And I'm like, look, you could be the next Steven Spielberg. You go do that. You go try and live your dream and follow your dream, and you don't put yourself into that box.
Exactly. And this is what I think every parent should educate their kid because really it all starts inside the home, not in school. Even
Right.
8 hours of the day they're in school, but the thing is how the parents encourage the kid to be able to achieve their goals and never to give up on them, basically. So I feel that you know what, more work we do to be able to encourage them, and when they go
Yes.
to school, they're being educated completely the opposite way. So it's kind of
Yes.
like a push and pull, and we don't seem to be able to achieve much of anything unless if that kid's mindset can actually detach itself from its environment. Now the thing is that how is that feasible?
It's very difficult. I mean, and I think part of our family is where my husband and we have stepped outside of the box. I mean, my husband is a military veteran, and he was very rigid and structured, and he had that full-time job, and he was managing somebody else's company. And so, and I had even followed through on a path at one point. I left working in the restaurants and, did the corporate thing for a while before I went out on my own finally. And I think for us, our children are watching us work really hard to fulfill a dream, and to see that it is not all rainbows and lollipops. Like, it
No,
is
this
extremely hard work, and we have really difficult moments, and we're exhausted, and we get cranky, and then, sometimes we can't be home, but we're building this life that, we see them, they're really proud of it. Like my daughter will wear our shirts for the restaurant to school and she'll walk around proudly and she tells everybody and everybody loves it. And, they feel really good about it. And I think that enables our children to see like you can do the things you want to do, but it's not going to be easy. And again, this goes back to you have to choose your heart, right? Do you
Yes.
want to be unhappy in a job that you hate for the rest of your life? Or do you want to follow your dream and, as difficult as it is? And my son had said one time, once he finishes college, he's going to move to California and he's probably going to be broke for a while. So I won't see him because he won't be able to afford to come home. And I said, yep, that's true. You probably will be broke. I won't be, we won't see you. You won't be able to afford to fly home. Maybe we'll be able to afford to send him home, but that's okay. That's a different thing. But, realizing that and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's how you're going to follow your dream and live the life you want because you're going to do that rather than just settle for, oh, I got to work and make money. That's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. The best part about it, actually, Erica, is that he's self-aware that
Right.
this, I would say, industry is not easy. I mean, when you go to California, you see a lot of like servers that are
Yeah.
potential future actors that have to be able to pay the bills to survive in the hope of they're going to be able to meet a producer or a director that will give them the opportunity of a lifetime. But the reality here is that, okay, not everyone have that emotional intelligence to be able to realize what's coming to them, and
Right.
sometimes they live in an illusion world. I mean, like, come to think of it, when you look at the movie The Matrix, the trilogy, um
Yeah.
it may be entertaining with the fights and all that, but there's a reality behind all that. We all live in an illusion,
Yes.
and the thing is that might as well create our own illusion to be more successful than failure. So if the mind can construct whatever we want it to construct, might as well create the best life for ourselves,
Exactly.
right?
That's
So
that's
I don't know
exactly
why
it.
people keep living in this environment. But then again, if you look at the amount of, or the percentage of mental health dealing in this country, there's now what, 28.1% of
Right.
mental illnesses that are actually treated. But what about the other 5 or 6% that do not disclose it? So we're
Right.
talking about 33% in this country. If there's 362 million people living in the US, you do the math. It's close to
Yep.
100 million people living with a mental illness. So how? And we're talking about bipolar, borderline personality,
Yep.
narcissism, and that's actually a very, very common nowadays. And PTSD, I mean, especially like, and then people think that PTSD is only those who actually did the army or military. No, people who actually
No.
had a childhood trauma are actually dealing with PTSD as well. So it's really so spread out there that people say, well, I am, I've been basically stamped with this mental illness. I'm gonna have to deal with it for the rest of my life. Yeah, you may, but what do you do with it? How do you react towards it? It's not about you being diagnosed with what mental illness that you
Right.
have to just accept it and just live the rest of your life with your head down. You could actually say, you know what? Let me do this. Let me try to find ways around it. Look at Tom Cruise. He's been dyslexic, but he's the most successful actor
Right.
on this planet. So again, you could extract the positive out of every single negative situation that you're in.
That is true. And for me too, I've actually, what I grew up, in poverty. I was surrounded by addiction. So I definitely have that PTSD and having to deal with the childhood trauma. And when I was young, I was diagnosed with, anxiety and panic disorder and OCD and PMDD and a host of things that it wasn't until my early 30s, when you're starting to hit that midlife zone that I realized like I can't I couldn't live with it anymore, and I had to figure out how to take that on and live with it or heal it. And so I spent a good decade healing myself away from that anxiety and panic disorder. And at first I didn't think it would work, but then I realized, and it all comes down to changing this mindset from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, like in understanding how anxiety and panic disorder works and realizing that I had triggers and, how I could work with those triggers. And over time, I eventually stopped feeling that level of anxiety. I don't have panic attacks anymore. And I had panic attacks for decades. And it's been almost a decade since I've had a panic attack. Not that I don't feel anxiety or I don't worry or I don't, get concerned about things, but it's not the same thing as having the disorder that can be so debilitating. It could, it would put me in bed for a whole day. And that stuff doesn't happen anymore. And it all came from really working with my mindset and, fighting the fear of the things that I wanted to do and just creating like you said, the illusion of the world around me that I wanted to live in and
That's
not living in the one that was handed to me.
absolutely right. Now, do you have sometimes some triggers that can remind you of those moments from the past and that push?
100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
you manage
Like,
this.
especially when, one of the things that triggers me a lot is when my husband and I get into an argument.
Mhm.
There was just so much fighting and so much stress and turmoil and running away and things that would happen when I was young, that when we start to get into an argument, that's my PTSD coming out saying like, oh, this is bad. You got to run away. This isn't working, so on and so forth. And it would always be, this intense feeling. And that was one of the triggers that um, I had realized was happening, that it's really silly. We're arguing about what kind of bagels do we want to buy. Real argument, right? He's like, I like these ones. And I'm like, no, I like these ones. Or, the kids have to have these. And it's, you start to bicker a little. But for me, that would cause such intense anxiety and panic because
Mhm.
it was a trigger point that I had to learn, like, okay, Erica, take a step back, take a deep breath. This is just a silly little thing. This isn't you, being a child in poverty, anything like that, so the triggers are still there. It's just important to actually recognize them and know when that's happening so you can step away from something or use some mindfulness techniques in order to help calm that down.
Okay, perfect. Well, the thing is that what I see now happening, especially with those who have gone through similar, I would say, situation as you did with, like childhood mental illnesses and all that.
Right.
Um, if you could just give a couple of advice to our listeners before we end this podcast and tell them exactly, when it comes to imposter syndrome, when it comes to all of that, how can they change their mindset from being limited to growth?
I like to use the word curiosity. I First, becoming self-aware is really difficult for a lot of people. And if you can become self-aware and understand what's happening in your mind by focusing on it, especially when you're having your negative thoughts or your bad feelings and saying, okay, I'm having this negative thought and I'm having this bad feeling. And then using a level of curiosity to ask yourself, why am I having this bad feeling and this negative thought? Why is this happening to me? And then pushing that further to say, well, how could I stop this? How could I prevent this? What would make me feel better? And then talking to yourself about that. And one of the ways that works, especially when you have a negative thought, and let's say you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you've put on a couple of pounds and you're like, oh my God, I look like crap. I feel like crap. Well, why? And then you might say, well, because I put on a couple of pounds. Well, why did you put on a couple of pounds? Well, because I've been feeling really anxious. I've been working too hard. Well, how can you go back and maybe heal that anxiety, maybe work a little less hours? And what would you feel if you worked a little less hours? And then if you decided maybe I'll go for a walk instead of, working that extra 20 minutes, I'm just going to go take a walk and, kind of just exploring that and then trying these things, go for a walk, do deep breathing exercises, sit out in nature, meditate, whatever it may take, and talk to yourself in a better way by taking that negative thought if I look like crap and saying, well, but I have beautiful eyes. I really love my eyes. And then all of a sudden now you're telling yourself something nice and your mind's going to forget that you just said your body looked like crap because it's going to focus on your amazing eyes that you have. And that is one way that you can take that situation and kind of turn it around. And it's an active process.
Mhm.
You actively have to work on that all of the time. You can't just do it one time and expect your mindset to change.
Well, yeah, it's practice makes perfect, right?
Right.
Well,
Yep, exactly. Or
Erica.
we'd like to say practice makes progress in our house.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's a different concept here. Okay,
Yeah.
different approach. I like it. Okay, perfect. Well, Erica, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. Again, thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your busy schedule, especially in the rest.
Thank you.
to join us, and we all appreciate your participation and willingness to share your remarkable and inspiring story with a large and loyal audience. Now, to our million listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as we did. Now, we're very excited for what's ahead in season 28 of the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, featuring a lineup of incredible guests with powerful stories that will continue to uplift and inspire all of you. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Fear and imposter syndrome are loud liars that shrink your vision and dim your potential. But you were never meant to play small. Every mistake, every doubt is a stepping stone, not a stop sign. A fixed mindset says, I can't, but a growth mindset whispers, I'm still learning. You're not your fears. You are the courage rising to meet them. Each time you choose growth over perfection, you rewrite the story of what's possible. Progress begins the moment you believe you belong in every room you enter. Own your worth. The world needs a version of you that refuses to give up. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.